Your phone slowed down. Not dramatically, not all at once, just gradually. Over 18 months, it started taking a half-second longer to open apps. The camera felt slightly worse. Some apps stopped working right. And then one day Apple or Samsung announced the new model. And suddenly your phone felt ancient. You told yourself it was just time for an upgrade. It wasn't time for an upgrade. You were managed into one. Because the slowdown wasn't random. The app incompatibility wasn't coincidence. And the timing. The way your current phone always seems to degrade right when the new one launches. That timing is not an accident. There is an entire industry built around one goal. Getting you to replace a device that still works. And it has been running, quietly, inside the phone in your pocket for the last 15 years. Today I'm going to show you exactly how it works. Let's start with the business model. Because it's not what most people think. Apple makes roughly 55% of its revenue from the iPhone. But here's what that number hides. The most profitable part of Apple's business isn't the hardware margin on a new phone. It's what happens after you buy the phone. The App Store, iCloud, Apple Music, Apple TV Plus, Apple Pay. Apple calls this the services segment. In 2023, Apple's services segment generated over $85 billion in revenue, with a profit margin of over 70%. The iPhone hardware, by comparison, runs at roughly 36% margin. So Apple makes significantly more profit per dollar from keeping you inside the ecosystem than from selling you the device itself. And this changes everything about how you should understand the upgrade cycle. Because a new iPhone isn't just a revenue event. It's a retention mechanism. It keeps you inside the ecosystem for another 2 to 3 years. It locks in another cycle of App Store purchases, iCloud subscriptions, and services revenue. The phone is the entry fee. The ecosystem is the product. And the upgrade cycle is how they make sure you keep paying it. Samsung runs a parallel model. Google advertising, Galaxy ecosystem, One UI lock-in. Different company, same architecture. The device you hold is not what they're selling. They're selling your continued participation in a closed system. And every upgrade cycle is a renewal of that participation. Planned obsolescence is the practice of designing a product to become obsolete or non-functional within a predictable time frame. Most people think this means the hardware falls apart. That's not how modern phone obsolescence works. The hardware is fine. Modern planned obsolescence works through software. Here is the mechanism. When Apple releases iOS 18, they optimize it for the iPhone 15 and 16. The iPhone 12 can technically run iOS 18, and Apple will let it. But the software was built to take advantage of hardware capabilities the 12 doesn't have. Background processing, neural engine speed, RAM management. On newer hardware, iOS 18 runs cleanly. On older hardware, it runs, but it runs slower. And Apple knows this. They ship the update anyway. Because shipping the update is what lets them say they support older devices. The support just isn't very good. But there's a second mechanism that's more aggressive. App developers follow Apple's SDK requirements. Every year, Apple pushes new development standards. Apps built to take advantage of new iOS features don't run as well on older operating systems. And apps that haven't been updated to new standards get removed from the App Store entirely. So even if iOS runs fine on your old phone, the apps you rely on start requiring newer versions. And newer iOS versions run worse on older hardware. You are being squeezed from both directions simultaneously. The operating system degrades your hardware performance. The App Store degrades your operating system. And in the middle of that squeeze is a 2-year upgrade window where a new phone solves both problems at once. In December 2017, a developer named John Poole published a benchmark analysis. He had noticed something unusual in iPhone performance data. iPhones with degraded batteries were showing dramatically lower CPU performance scores than the same models with healthy batteries. The CPU was being throttled, artificially limited, based on battery health. Not disclosed to users. Not optional. Not reversible unless you replace the battery. Apple confirmed it. Their explanation was reasonable on its face. Older batteries can't supply peak power consistently. An unthrottled phone with a degraded battery might randomly shut down under heavy load. Throttling prevented those shutdowns. But here's what they didn't say. They didn't tell users this was happening. They didn't offer a battery replacement as an alternative. They didn't provide any way to see that your phone was being throttled. And they didn't tell users that a $40 battery replacement would restore full performance. Instead, Users with throttled phones experienced slow devices and concluded, reasonably, that their phone was old and needed to be replaced. Apple was sued in 32 countries. In the United States alone, Apple agreed to pay $500 million to settle a class action lawsuit. In France, they were fined 27 million euros for what regulators called planned obsolescence under French consumer protection law. In Italy, they were fined 10 million euros. In Brazil, fined. In Chile, fined. $500 million is a large number. It's also roughly 3 days of Apple's revenue. The financial disincentive to stop the practice is almost non-existent. The incentive to continue it, in terms of upgrade cycle revenue, is enormous. Apple has since made battery health more visible in iOS settings. They have not made battery degradation thresholds less aggressive. They have not made it easier or cheaper to replace batteries. And the throttling mechanism still exists. Now let's talk about how you actually pay for the phone. Most Americans don't buy their phone outright. They use a carrier installment plan. AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile. $24 or $36 a month, 0% interest, sounds reasonable. Here's the trap. When you trade in your old phone after 24 months and upgrade to a new one, you feel like you paid nothing. The new phone cost you nothing extra. Just continue the payments. But what actually happened is this. You paid 24 installments of $30. That's $720 for your old phone. You traded it in for a credit worth, let's say, $200 toward the new one. You received $200 in trade-in credit for a phone you paid $720 for. The carrier kept the $520 difference. Now you sign up for another 24 months at $35 on the new phone. You are on a permanent subscription to a device you will never fully own at market value. And here's the second layer. The installment plan is bundled with your monthly service. When you upgrade, the carrier makes it easy. When you want to leave the carrier, they make it hard. Because you have a device balance outstanding, you are locked to the carrier for the duration of the installment plan. The phone is not $24 a month. The phone is a 2-year lock-in contract with early termination economics disguised as flexible monthly payments. A 2022 Consumer Report study found that most people who use carrier installment plans significantly underestimate the total cost of phone ownership over a 4-year period. The average actual cost, including device, service, insurance, and accessory purchases, was over $4,000 per line. Per 4 years. For a device that costs $150 to manufacture. The trade-in is where the illusion is most complete. Apple's trade-in program, carrier trade-in offers, and third-party buyers all operate on the same fundamental dynamic. They need you to trade in. Not because your old phone has enormous value to them. Because the trade-in is the psychological mechanism that makes the upgrade feel free. Here is the actual math. An iPhone 14 Pro released at $1,100. 2 years later, Apple's trade-in offer for that phone, approximately $220. The same phone on eBay, sold privately, $450 to $500. The trade-in offer is less than half the private sale value, and it gets applied as a credit toward a new $1,300 phone, making the new phone feel like it costs $1,080, when you could have sold the old one privately for $500 and paid $800. The difference is almost $300. Multiplied across the number of people who trade in through official channels every cycle, we are talking about billions of dollars in captured residual value. But most people don't sell privately. Because the trade-in is easy, the process is instant, and the credit appears immediately. The $300 difference requires effort. The instant gratification requires none. That is not an accident. Convenience is a financial instrument. And Apple, Samsung, and every carrier have designed their trade-in processes to be maximally convenient and minimally transparent about what you're leaving on the table. Let's talk about the end of software support. Apple typically supports iPhones with iOS updates for 5 to 6 years. After that, your phone stops receiving security updates. This sounds like a technical limitation. It isn't. A 2021 study by the European Environmental Bureau found no technical reason why smartphones cannot receive security updates for at least 7 to 10 years. The hardware is capable. The decision to end support after 5 years is a business decision, not an engineering one. When Apple ends support for a device, they announce it quietly. The average consumer doesn't track iOS support timelines. What they notice is that their phone stopped getting updates. and then they start getting warnings. This device is no longer supported. Some features may not work. For the best experience, upgrade to iPhone. That warning is not informational. That warning is a conversion tool. It exists to create urgency. It exists to make an unsupported device feel dangerous to use. And it works. Google's Pixel phones have a similar model. Samsung has extended their update window under regulatory and competitive pressure. But the fundamental architecture remains, a defined end of life that creates a defined upgrade moment. And here is what makes this particularly significant. The European Union passed the Right to Repair Directive in 2024. Part of that directive requires manufacturers to provide software updates for a minimum of 5 years and security updates for a minimum of 8 years. Manufacturers lobbied hard against it. It passed anyway. In the United States, no equivalent requirement exists. Manufacturers set their own support timelines, and they set them at the length that maximizes upgrade frequency, not device longevity. None of this works without the psychology, because a phone that runs slightly slower isn't broken. A phone without the newest camera feature still takes photos. A phone that's 2 years old still makes calls, sends texts, and runs every app you actually use. The hardware argument for upgrading is almost never compelling on its merits. The upgrade cycle runs on something else entirely. It runs on status. The iPhone isn't just a device. It's a visible marker of whether you're current. The dynamic island, the action button, the camera bump design. These are social signals. Apple designs each new iPhone to be visually distinguishable from the previous one. Not because it needs to look different to function differently, because looking different is the entire point. The visible difference is what makes the upgrade socially legible, and they lean on this explicitly in their marketing. The camera, the chip, the whatever's new this year. Each feature announcement is calibrated not to demonstrate functional superiority, but to make last year's model feel incomplete. There is also the FOMO architecture. iOS features that launch on new hardware are not always available on older supported devices. Live activities, certain camera modes, specific AI features. The feature gap is real, but the feature gap is also manufactured. Some of these restrictions are hardware-based. Many are software-based, applied to hardware that could technically support the feature. The result is a slow accumulation of missing things, each one individually small. Together, enough to make an 18-month-old phone feel like it's from a different era. The battery throttling lawsuits we already covered. But the regulatory response went further. In 2023, the European Union finalized new rules requiring standardized USB-C charging across all devices. This was a direct response to Apple's proprietary Lightning connector, which forced users to buy Apple-specific accessories and created switching costs that reinforced the upgrade cycle. Apple fought this for years. They lost. The iPhone 15 shipped with USB-C. The EU also passed regulations requiring that smartphone batteries must be user-replaceable by 2027. Apple's current battery design requires professional tools and voids the warranty if self-replaced. Under the new rules, that will need to change. France made planned obsolescence a criminal offense in 2015. Maximum penalty: 2 years in prison and 5% of annual revenue. Apple was fined under this law for the battery throttling. South Korea fined Apple and Google for anti-competitive App Store practices. The United States Department of Justice filed a landmark antitrust lawsuit against Apple in 2024, specifically citing the ways iOS restrictions lock users into the Apple ecosystem and make switching to Android costly. Every major regulatory body that has looked closely at this system has found the same thing. The upgrade cycle is not a natural consequence of technological progress. It is an engineered outcome, maintained through software decisions, ecosystem lock-in, and support timelines that serve manufacturer interests over consumer wants. Let's be precise. Apple wins. Hardware margin, services revenue, ecosystem lock-in. The upgrade cycle funds all three. Carriers win. Installment plan lock-in, service contract retention, trade-in value capture. The average American has been with the same carrier for over 6 years. The phone upgrade is the primary mechanism keeping them there. Accessory manufacturers win. Every new phone form factor obsoletes existing cases, cables, and accessories. Billions of dollars in accessories purchased annually for devices that worked last year. Third-party repair is actively suppressed. Apple's parts pairing policy means that many iPhone components only function correctly when installed by an Apple-authorized technician. A screen replaced by an independent repair shop may show warning messages in iOS. A battery replaced by anyone other than Apple triggers reduced functionality. The right to repair movement has won some battles at the state level. New York, California, Minnesota. But Apple's compliance with these laws has been minimal, technical, and designed to satisfy the legal requirement while preserving the repair barrier in practice. You win, specifically and narrowly, if you buy your phone outright, not on installment. You skip one generation cycle, buying every other model instead of every year. You sell your old phone privately rather than trading it in. You replace the battery on your current phone before concluding it needs to be replaced. And you separate the software narrative from the hardware reality. Your phone is not old. Your phone has been made to feel old. Those are very different things. Here's what I want you to sit with. The device in your pocket right now probably works. Maybe not perfectly. Maybe it's a little slower than it used to be. Maybe the battery doesn't last as long. Maybe there are features on the new model you don't have. But it works. It makes calls. It takes photos. It runs the apps your life runs on. The feeling that it isn't enough, that you're falling behind, that you need the upgrade, that this phone is old, that feeling was manufactured. Not by accident. Not as a side effect. As a deliberate output of an industry that makes its money when you replace something that works. A $40 battery replacement would solve most of what feels like an upgrade problem. An unsupported iPhone can still run the apps you actually use. A 2-year-old camera still takes photos that are indistinguishable from a 3-year-old camera to anyone who isn't measuring them side by side. The gap between what your phone does and what the new phone does is almost always smaller than the gap between what your phone does and what the marketing says you're missing. So what do you actually do? Replace the battery before you replace the phone. Sell privately, not through trade-in. Buy outright when you do upgrade, or use a credit union financing option, not a carrier installment plan. Skip a generation, and the next time your phone feels slow, ask whether it got slower or whether you were told it got slower. Because those are not the same question. And the answer is almost always the same. If you want to understand the rest of the systems, gym memberships, streaming subscriptions, bank overdraft fees, grocery loyalty cards, subscribe to Think True. Because the real story is never the one being advertised.